Bhyo Namaha. I'm happy to be with my very old friend David Frawley and Pandit Satish Sharma ji, whom I meet today, and I hope to meet again and again, and of course with you, Vibhuti ji, and all the audience of Jaipur Dialogue. Now, talking on the subject of Varna, Varna and Jati, as the Indian terms go, and then, of course, using the term caste because that's being used in the English language by European scholars and Americans and Indologists and a whole lot of people, including politicians. One has to look at a bit of history and then the present issue. Now, the present issue is something which is perhaps only 4 or 5 years old with the current setup and the current things that are going on in the United States and this new wokeism. And if you see it in the context of this wokeism, then you have to talk about it in a different way because they have equated the caste or the so-called Hindu caste system as they look upon it and as they try to foist it on everybody else's mind. If you look upon what they are saying and equating it with German Nazism, Hitler's anti-Jewish activities, and then of course the white-black conflict. Now this is a very recent political jargon which has come about, and one has to confront it as the battle of the day. This is one thing. But if you look upon how the West, so to speak, or how the very early Christian missionaries or the 19th century Indologists, or even some of the very contemporary Indologists, very famous ones in the North American continent, have been looking upon caste, is their very old formula of what was called Hindu as the Homo hierarchicus. That this is the essential crux of Hindu thought. Now, disregarding all the Mahavakyas of Hinduism, like Sarvamidam Khalu Brahma, that everything is of the same level, everything comes out of Brahma, disregarding what is given right in the beginning of Manusmriti, where it is said that Brahma and Brahma and Brahmana are one substance, and then according to certain activities they fall into different roles. Disregarding all that, they postulate a category which is enforced by the so-called Brahmins. Now there are so many stereotypes created over the years that they have made a total picture which is historically neither true, which is unjustified, which is not the journey of India in the last recorded 5,000 or 7,000 years of textual evidence. So we have our side of the story. After all these years, I'm very clear that I have my side of the story to tell, and I have to confront what is their side of the story, the Indologist story, the Western story. And one has to say that, look, you are deliberately portraying things which did not even exist. For instance, now, the high point is the so-called lowest Varna or the Shudra Varnas, and they would go immediately to the so-called untouchables. Now, in ancient India, and according to the descriptions one finds in the text, of course there were some people who were untouchable in the sense that you would not go and sit with them or eat with them. But then those were parameters which were drawn, just as you draw parameters today I mean, you don't go into an operation theater today with your shoes on. There are certain precautions that you take right now. There are parameters and boundaries that you draw for the sake of certain divisions that you have to make for survival. Similar things were done at that time. For instance, a chandal would not be allowed to come and sit in just anybody's home. But then one has to see what is the sociological order, what was the real thing that was going on, and one has to see if this was the dominant thing. After all, this is one small part of the activity of a very vast society in which people behaved in so many different ways. And the norms were so different and so complicated that unless you understand the totality of that society, you cannot understand the thought behind it. The whole question of whom to touch and whom not to touch is a very sophisticated idea. And the idea of what is pure and what is impure is very different from what is considered to be discrimination in modern times. This is something so different in habits, this is something so different in the whole social order, and it is so different in terms of what was considered as valuable and what was considered as something which had to be done. Now, I have just concentrated a bit more upon something like touch or touchability or untouchability or pure or impure, but these are some fundamental concepts which have to be seen in the context of something highly philosophical, something very practical, and something everyday. And unless you see the whole picture of the Varna ashram, you will not be able to see that this was a very complex cooperative web. It was not a society where people were pulling and tugging at each other. It was not a society where people were rebelling to come out of their caste. As a matter of fact, even in my childhood, I have seen that people thought of their caste as something to be proud of, because the profession and the work which they performed had to be of high quality according to what they were trained, being in that particular jati or caste. So for them, what was very important was the excellence of their work.